Hello, I'm Dean Gerdeman, a researcher at American Institutes for Research, or AIR for short, a nonprofit research organization. I am part of a team at AIR that has been providing data and measurement support for coaches and schools involved in STEP, the Supporting Teacher Effectiveness Project. I will be your guide, along with your coach, through a series of video modules about incorporating data and evidence in STEP. By now, you probably know some things about STEP and are ready to start your own efforts for professional growth and learning in the STEP process. Through this process, we expect that you will learn a lot about your teaching and your colleagues' teaching, in part through the careful collection and analysis of evidence related to important challenges that you face as teachers. This short module is meant to introduce you to the role of data and measurement in STEP and help get this aspect of the project started off right. We summarize the ways the STEP teams and the process depend on sound use of data and measurement throughout. We hope you will find this module helpful and wish you good luck as you get your work in STEP underway. In this module, you'll learn what sound, data, and measurement can enable your team to do in STEP. First, let's start with defining our terms, beginning with data and measurement. Data are facts and observations used to build knowledge or evidence. Data can take many forms and come from different sources. STEP data may come in the form of numbers, such as survey results, student rubric scores, or test scores. STEP data may also come in the form of words, like notes from discussions during focus groups, or comments on an observation form. STEP data may come from existing sources in your classroom, school, or district, as well as new sources that your team decides to select, create, or adapt. Measurement is a disciplined process of collecting or using data to determine the quantities or attributes of particular phenomena to provide value and meaning. In STEP, measurement of student growth, for example, consists of defining what aspect of growth you wish to understand and document, figuring out ways to use data for evidence of growth, and then summarizing and comparing that evidence to understand phenomena such as which students improved, over what time frames, and by how much. With those two definitions under our belt, what can sound data and measurement enable your team to do in STEP? Taken together, sound use of data and measurement will enable your team to 1. Validate the challenge you seek to overcome. 2. Discover teaching practices that potentially ameliorate your challenge. 3. Confirm which practices demonstrate improvements related to your challenge across classrooms or teachers. 4. Share your successful results with confidence. In short, data and measurement are essential to the work your team will do in each STEP phase. Before we get into the specifics, let's hear from Italia Lee, a STEP coach talking about what her team learned when they used data to discover potential solutions to their challenge. I sat down with her and asked her what her team learned from one of the measures they had used during the Discover phase.
Well, one thing that really stands out about what they learned about the Common Weekly Assessments was that, especially when there was two teachers using the same practice, but one maybe tweaked it a little bit and got better results, or did something a little bit different and got results that maybe weren't as promising. And so they really, and through seeing that, they were like, oh, then maybe I need to do this differently next time, or I need to do what you did, or oh, I should have done it that way, but I didn't. And so it's really them reflecting, learning, and realizing, what practices might yield better results than others. And they're starting to see that. And then through this too is the idea of that cross grade level collaboration, where we have a 5th grade teacher who wants to go see a kindergarten teacher because of the results that she's getting. And perhaps once they go to see, like in reciprocal teaching in math, oh, what are you doing? How are you doing that? And how can I modify that for my grade level? So there's really this community that's being built, this collaborative community where we're all really learning from each other through using data and seeing the results.
In this clip, Italia discussed not only how her team used student learning data from Common Weekly Assessments to gain insight into their practice, but also how they were growing as a team. Documenting these changes in student outcomes, teaching practices, and conditions for professional collaboration is one of the key roles of data in STEP. We refer to these 3 categories of data as the STEP ingredients that need to be purposefully measured. These 3 ingredients again are student outcomes related to your team's challenge area, teaching practices that may address those challenges, and professional conditions for teacher collaboration. In other words, the opportunities and barriers for sharing effective practices among teachers in your school. Over the course of the 4 STEP phases, your STEP team will choose which data or information your team needs for each ingredient in order to make informed decisions in STEP. Let's pause here for a moment and have a conversation with your team about what useful measurement and data might look like in STEP. Your coach will pause the video now and lead you through that conversation. Welcome back. During your conversation, you may have discussed a number of things that make data and evidence trustworthy so that you can confidently base your decisions on those data. STEP has established 3 criteria for supporting good data and measurement decisions and practices based on input from teachers and researchers. Let's see how these criteria match up with the ones that you and your team came up with. The first STEP measurement criterion is relevance. In other words, is the measure meaningful and important and closely related to your team's identified challenge? The second is rigor. Is it accurately and consistently collected and analyzed? And finally, the third criterion is sensitivity. Is a measure finely tuned enough to pick up important differences or changes? Is it nuanced enough to detect variability? Throughout STEP, your team will want to consistently check and discuss the extent to which the data procedures and measurement in each phase are relevant, rigorous, and sensitive. Here's Italia talking about how her team approached one of the student learning measures using these 3 criteria.
Relevance is very important because obviously we want it aligned to what we're already doing. Rigorous in the sense of consistency, that we were getting consistent, we were doing something consistently, hopefully to get consistent results. I mean, that's the goal too, in identifying whether something is promising or not. And then sensitivity, really the teachers chose, I mean, it was presented to them like, oh, well, maybe we just want to gather data just by the grade level. But they actually chose to look at it by teacher, so that way they knew, oh, well, who do we go to then when, oh, you're having these wonderful results, like, I want to come learn from you. And so they realized that they needed to be the ones, and that goes back to that, you know, being comfortable with sharing your data and creating that space where that can happen, and creating that environment where we can talk to each other and you know, really learn from each other, because you're coming from the perspective of how can I help my students achieve, and not so much that it's you, it's just how can I get better so that I can help my students achieve. And that has also always been the standpoint from which, you know, we worked from.
So rigor, relevance, and sensitivity in measurement can yield useful data. How did the list of characteristics of useful data that your team generated compare? Take a moment or two to discuss with your team. We will unpack these criteria a bit more in later modules. Consistently working toward these criteria will help position your team to determine with confidence whether the measures for the STEP ingredients, student outcomes, teaching practices, and conditions for teacher collaboration are actually changing. Now that we've discussed the definition of data and measurement, the 3 ingredients you'll be measuring in STEP, and the 3 STEP measurement criteria, we'll walk through the measurement goals, activities, and tools you'll be using in each phase of the work. You may want to take notes on the note-taking tool that your coach provided. First, seek. In this phase, you'll gather and use available evidence to collaboratively decide on an important challenge facing teaching and learning in your school. You will also be planning your data collection strategies going forward. We'll talk more about this phase in the next module. Discover. In the next phase, the Discover phase, you will explore classrooms where data suggests promising or positive deviant practices are occurring, and then use a variety of strategies to identify what those practices might be. One type of tool that you may use in this phase is common student learning assessments, like exit slips or quizzes, similar to what Italia discussed earlier. Another type of tool may be teacher interview or classroom visit protocols that help your team collect evidence of uncommon practices for discussion and elaboration. Confirm. In this phase, your team will design a disciplined approach to try those practices you discovered in a variety of classrooms. Your measurement approach will allow you to gather sufficient data to examine when and how the practices were used and how students seem to respond to those practices. The need for rigorous measurement is especially important as you attempt to confirm your discoveries in this phase. As you know, students learn in lots of different ways from lots of different teachers. And so distinguishing those practices that produce meaningful evidence of improving student outcomes from those that don't is necessary for this work. In this phase, you will continue to use common student learning assessments, classroom visit protocols that are more targeted than in the Discover phase, and tools that document teacher experiences such as practice tally sheets or plan, do, study, act forms. As you test your discoveries using these tools, your coach will walk you through a decision tree that looks something like this. You may find evidence of positive deviant practice on your first attempt. If so, make certain that evidence meets the STEP measurement criteria and proceed to the share phase, celebrating your success. Quite likely, however, you may find that you are not confident that you found evidence of positive deviance at first. If that's the case, you may need to refine your measurement approach, or if your measures met the criteria, but you found evidence that the practice wasn't having an impact your team expected, then you may need to modify the practice being tested or go back to the Discover phase and identify different practices to test. Having to explore these different branches to share should not be viewed as detours, but part of the STEP process that will likely promote rigorous inquiry and deeper and longer-lasting learning. Share. Finally, once you've confirmed your discoveries, you'll share them, summarizing the evidence that convinced you so that you may inspire others to try them out in their own classrooms. The primary tool here will be the creative use of data displays and visuals. Across the 4 phases, you'll be checking in to see how the conditions for professional collaboration have changed. You'll probably use an online survey to collect and measure both where you started and how conditions changed over the course of STEP. Capturing and documenting your stories of group successes and challenges will also be a useful measurement strategy. Before we wrap up, your coach will pause this video so you can discuss and reflect on what we've just described. The measurement options may seem abstract at the moment, but STEP is unique in that you get to decide what you want to measure and how to measure it, following the STEP measurement principles, in order to find and share solutions that may exist within your school community. Throughout the remaining modules, we'll hear from Italia again, featuring her STEP team story and instruments as a touchstone. Creating and using practical measures that are also relevant, rigorous, and sensitive will be challenging and rewarding work for your team. Thanks for your participation in this video module, and good luck as you embark on the STEP process.